Welcome to another episode of Let's Color Grade. And in this one, I'm just gonna sit down and grade the shot that I got from Nungnung Waterfall here in Bali last week. And yeah, we're just gonna jump straight into DaVinci Resolve and get started. All right, so as you can see, we are inside the color page in DaVinci Resolve, and I'm gonna make it super simple for myself today. Head into my Power Grade folder here, and just right click on my 2024 workflow here, Power Grade, and just add that. If you haven't already, you can download this through the Google Drive folder that's linked down below. I have had a video where I went through the whole workflow, so you can find that on the top here as well. But to make everything simple, we're going to use this as our base. Now, before I jump into changing a little bit of the note tree here, first up, let's look at the conversion. So it's taking it from Canon Cinema Gamut, Canon Log 3, to DaVinci Wide Gamut and DaVinci Intermediate. And I actually want to preserve the highlights a little bit more. So I'm just going to take the max input nits here, crank it all the way up to 10,000. You can see it makes a minor difference, but still does a little bit. And in the end here, it's taking it from DaVinci Wide Gamut and Intermediate into Rec 79 and Gamut 2.4. You can play around with Rec 79A if you are grading on a Mac and outputting to iPhone or something. I've set my display up to be Rec 79 and Gamut 2.4, so that's what I'm working in. And for the project settings, 4K, 30 frames per second, because I usually work with Instagram as well, so that's why everything is in 30. And I'm using DaVinci YRGB, DaVinci Wide Gamut and Intermediate on the timeline, and Rec 79 and Gamut 2.4 on the output color space. So that's all the settings out of the way, the color space transform. Now I'm going to tweak this a little bit. So I already have a vision for this. I'm not going to use any orange here. I'm going to rename this one to Dehaze, and I'm going to rename this one that's called LOT to Primaries. And then I'm going to add another one here that's called Contrast. And if you saw my last episode on Behind the Shot with drones, you'll see that I'm trying out this new technique. So this is Contrast 1, and this is going to be Contrast S for Contrast Soft. That will make sense in just about a second. So let's clean up the node graph again. See if we can maybe get a little bit more real estate here. Something like this. And let's get started. So to explain the node tree really quick, we go from color space transform to take it into DaVinci Wide Gamut, and at the end we are converting into Rec 79. So everything in here is DaVinci Wide Gamut. Then I'm going to work backwards in my color correction. So first we're going to work with contrast here, then exposure, then balance. These you can do exactly how you want, how you feel the best. Just start with your color correction. You can do it however you want. And then we're going to move into creating the look and everything. And that's where we're going to use the primaries and curves first to do the base. And then we're going to do some masking in these parallel nodes afterwards. So let's start with the contrast. And here comes why I have these two parallel nodes as well. So if we move into the waveform here, so we can actually see what we're doing. First up, in the first one, I actually want to start creating some normal contrast. So I'm going to pull it down quite far in the shadows here. And then I'm going to make the S-curve by pulling up the highlights. And now we're getting this very harsh, contrasty look. And that could be cool for some things, but I wanted to look a little bit more cinematic. And how I found that is to make sure that the waveform here is touching only between 10 and 90. So it has these soft highlights and these soft blacks here. And that's why I've made these parallel nodes, because now in the contrast soft, instead of working with one curve here, where I have to then move up the blacks and move down the whites, I'm going to move into the contrast soft here, and then I'm going to pull up my blacks here somewhere till they are around 10 here, and then I'm going to pull down my whites as well. And I'm trying to squeeze everything back into this. So you'll see that with this, we get a lot of a softer look again. With the contrast is not harsh. And because the parallel node is equally balancing out and blending these two nodes, this is a way that I'm trying to experiment with if this is a nice way to work or not. So it's not final. It's just I'm showing you this technique as I'm playing around with it. I'm always trying to improve my workflow or find new ways to do things. So this is a technique that I'm playing around with at the moment. So let's play around with the contrast a little bit more here. And now I'm just looking at the image, try and see where I want it. And I think this is pretty good. So if we take both nodes here, we went from this to this. And I think it looks pretty good. You still have that soft kind of edge. This was without the softness, and this is kind of just softens everything out a little bit. Just make it look a little bit more cinematic, quotation marks if you want. And then for the exposure, I'm not sure we're going to do much. I might want to brighten up this shot overall just a little bit, but that's pretty much it, mostly because I didn't like the shadows that were a little bit dark. But I could have also done that in the contrast in this case. So overall, the exposure were great on this. It was shot on my Canon R6, and yeah, everything looks fine. Now for the balance, let's jump into the vector scope here. I'm just gonna pull that up a little bit larger. I do actually like where everything is sitting, but you can see it's sitting up towards the warmer side here. This blob is turned up between the red and the yellow here, pushed down a little bit to the greens. And I might want it to be a little bit cooler, mainly because if I am hovering above the whites here, I can see that they are a little bit to the left. So I kind of want them to be pushed a little bit more towards the right, just to blend that and give it a little bit more of a cool tone to the waterfall. But also I just think that looks a little bit better overall, and we want a good starting point. It wasn't that warm, so I want to just blend that and balance that out. Then we're going to check the skin here, and I do think it looks good. It might be a slight tad too red, so I'm just going to try and pull down the red a little bit and then remove a little bit of green as well. I think that looks pretty good. Maybe that was too much green removed, something like this. And now we just have a very neutral, nice looking image with the contrast that I want to work on moving forward in this. So now we get to the look part. Here I'm going to jump into the primaries. I'm going to keep using the lift, gamma, and gain. And what I want to try to do using the vector scope again is try and get a little bit of teal into these greens here and not lose too much of the overall balance in the rest of the image. So I'm going to start with the lift here. And I think I'm just going to use these sliders here. So I'm going to add a little bit of blue here and then a little bit of green just to try and push that down. I'm going to try and make it more of like a, yeah, I'm going to say the word again, cinematic look. So these teal really helps those green come alive, but I don't want these to be sacrificed too much because now these are fading a little bit. So I'm going to try and counter that a little bit by adding back in some red and some. Actually, we're going to try to just do the opposite. I'm going to remove some blue and some green here from the bottom, from the gain, sorry. So just something like this. What I'm really trying to do is take the scopes here, and I don't want the brightest points here to change. And now it's pretty much just the shadows that are actually being affected. Everything from the black point, which is the left, and upwards. But then I'm balancing it out with the gain up here, which is the white point and down. And that way we're kind of getting this look that just in overall measurements look pretty good to me. So with that, I'm going to head into the curves here. That's the next node. And here I really want to balance out the greens to make them look, in my eyes, better. And I also want to see if we can do something about the skin tones here. So first up, I'm going to lock off the skin tones. They are balanced on the skin tone line here that you can activate by clicking on those adjustment settings here and then the skin tone indicator. And if you don't already have the qualifier on here, you can add the qualifier, and then you can click on these and say display qualifier focus. That's how you get the qualifier to show you where you are with this blob here. So I want to center all of the colors here a little bit more. So I'm going to make 2 points. I'm going to make them around here in the yellows, or a little bit more towards the yellows, and on the red side here. So I'm trying to log off this area here between the red and the yellow, so I'm closer to the red than the yellow. So I'm just getting the center portion of this. Then I'm going to try and move the reds a little bit down, and then move the yellow side a little bit up. By that, I'm centering everything around the skin tone line here. You can see the skin becomes a little bit more yellow and orange. I can see I'm hitting the hair a little bit as well, and I don't really want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and move this point here to the left, like so, and then this point a little bit to the left as well. So I'm not hitting. Now I'm not really hitting the hair that much, only a little bit. So I'm going to move it a little bit further. I'm using these sliders here to make it a little bit more easy to actually get the rotation that I want. And I'm going to try to make this 0 again. And now we're only pretty much hitting the skin tones here. So they were very pink before, and now they're just centered a little bit more. And we could just try and maybe add a little bit more back into the reds here. Just pull them up a little bit more, something like this. And I think that looks pretty good in my eyes. Then comes the greens. And for those, I want to make a point around here. And I kind of want to log off the hair as well. So we're going to try and make a point here to save the hair a little bit. And then I'm just going to move all of the greens a little bit more towards the yellow. We can see that on the vector scope here that the greens are moving up towards the yellows. And we can also see that all the greens become warmer in the image here. So this might have been a little bit too much. So I'm just gonna try and move them a little bit more to the left here, a little bit more up. Just want to censor them a little bit more. And then I'm gonna head into my desaturation here, and I'm gonna log off my greens again here. I'm just gonna desaturate them a little bit more. That gives that nice faded green look that looks, yeah, I don't know if it looks more cinematic, but I like it. And now we've lost a lot of that teal color we put into it originally. So maybe we're just gonna dial back a tad here just to save some of that. Overall, I think this looks pretty good for starters. So let's just see what we did with the primaries and the curves here. We turn this off and then on again. It is very subtle, but we have a little bit more teal in the shadows overall. And then we have some greens that look a little bit less artificial, a little bit more desaturated, a little bit more yellow and red, if you will. So warmer greens, a little bit teal, and then we just saved or narrowed in the skin tones a little bit as well towards the skin tone line. So let's head into the masking. We have an inside node here. That's just a normal parallel node. Right click that and add an outside node. Then we have this one that's going to select the opposite of what we selected in the first one. So I'm going to make a circular power window. And here we just want to enhance the subject in the middle. Joya, my girlfriend here. And then we're going to add a little bit of contrast just by lowering the shadows and increasing the highlights a little bit. Now it becomes too dark. So I'm just going to add first one gamma here. And now we're just getting a little bit of that contrast, which is nice. And I might actually add just like half in the lift as well, because I don't want it to be too harsh. I want to keep that softness that we had before. And if we click on the outside node here, click Shift H, we can see that we've selected everything but what we have in the first node. And here I just want to pull down the shadows a little bit here to get a little bit more contrast. So I'm going to counter it a little bit by pulling up the blacks. If we're looking at the waveform, we can see better what we're doing here, and just pulling up the blacks a little bit. We just want to add more contrast. So I'm both looking at the waveform, not going too far below 10 here, but I'm also just going to try and get this to look very nicely. So we definitely have some more contrast now. So I'm going to head back into my contrast here and just lift that up overall and balance that a little bit more. So I'm not getting too much. I still like this faded look. That's what I'm going for in this one. If you don't, then you can just leave the blacks alone and let them be where they were. So with the inside and the outside node, we went from this to this. That just centers the intention in the middle a lot more and just lowers the exposure, lowers the shadows all around a little bit more as well. So now we have the highlights and shadows. We're not going to do too much with this, but I kind of want to emphasize the light coming from up here somewhere. It's shining down here. It's coming a lot from up here actually, and then down. As you can see, the shadows down here. And then we want to add some shadows this direction from down here and then up afterwards. So let's take the highlights first, and I'm just going to make a big circular mask, move it up here, something like this. And then I'm going to add a lot of softening. Let's just try with 100 actually. I think that's pretty good. And we want to emulate it. It's coming pretty much from up top here. So something like this. Moving it a little bit further, and then I'm just going to add a little bit of brightness here. Again, I'm looking at the waveform. I don't want it to be too much. Just want to add a little bit here. And I'm going to lower the whites again a little bit. And something like this I think looks pretty good. Again, I'm going to head back to my contrast here. Just lower that a tad. So don't want it to be too much. I also want my skin tones here to not go too far up, and they actually are quite far up. They might be a little bit too bright. If we turn off the exposure adjustments that we did earlier, that helps a little bit. So I'm going to reset that again. Now that we are playing around with everything else, I don't really need that. And then I'm actually going to dehaze it a little bit as well. I feel like that gives more of that mist effect that we actually had this morning. I'm going to search for dehaze up in my settings, and I'm going to apply that here. Now, first up, it looks really bad. But what I want to check first is this was our mask here. And because they're connected with the alpha input and output here, this should give us the same selection. So sometimes this goes wrong, this breaks in the power grade, so I just wanted to make sure that it's still there. So we only want to dehaze the top here, and right now it's set it to actually dehaze, but I want to go opposite. So I want to go a little bit on the negative side here, this should be okay. And it just, you can see it just softens everything out up here. Again, giving us a little bit of a softer look, but I like how it kind of hazes everything a little bit. Definitely not necessary, just a preference of mine. Then for the shadows, we're gonna create a rectangular mask here. And we're gonna pull this out quite a bit. Just gonna try and make it from the bottom here, kind of opposite of what we had the circular one do. I feel like it's easier to do with a rectangular mask like this. Gonna pull out the softening quite a bit, something like this. Again, we're gonna move in and we might just wanna create a little bit of shadows here. Not too much, but again, just to pull it back in. I don't think we need to add the shadows here. We might end up just making everything a bit too soft. I think it's okay that it comes down a little bit more here, a little bit below 10. And then for the teal, we're gonna make sure that we have the same selected again here. And here I just wanna make a little bit more teal in the shadows and its darker side here to create more balance. So the vector scope, we're gonna pull up again. And then I'm gonna take the offset here and just pull that down a little bit to get some of that teal back. It's gonna be very subtle. You could also just do that in this one, but this just separates them. So now I can see exactly what the teal is doing and exactly what the shadows are doing as well. So with our masking, if we select all of this, we went from this to this. So I think the highlights might be a slight tad too bright now. So that's the only thing. I might go back in here and then just lower the highlights a little bit to around -10. And with that, I actually think this looks pretty damn good. So if we try and play through the whole clip here, it looks something like this. Teal and orange in a subtle way, and the soft contrast that we've been building out through the whole clip. I think that's a pretty cool look, and I really enjoy grading like this. So no use of LUTs in this case, just the pure manipulation of the notes and this note tree here. And if this was too technical, go back and watch some of my other videos that are a little bit more simple. Some of the beginner note trees, you can do that. These are using some more advanced techniques with the masking and with the alpha mask here and with the contrast here. So let me know down below in the comments if you have any questions or any other videos or something you would like to see in this series. I'm slowly bringing it back. It's gonna be from time to time, and if I have ideas, something that you guys wanna see, then I will bring it back and I will, collaborate something more. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something, and until the next time, take care.